The mother of a mafia boss set a silver tray of blank cards in front of 5 wealthy women and ordered each of them to write down the name of one servant who had to be fired, but she never expected a 27-year-old maid to break her quiet silence with a single truth that made the ruthless woman burst into tears. 40 staff members worked in that seaside mansion in Marblehead, Massachusetts, and Rosalind Rinaldi, the 66-year-old mother with a weak heart, believed this brutal test was the only honest way to discover what a woman was truly made of, while her powerful son Vittorio sat silently in the corner, enforcing her authority without speaking a word. One by one, the elite women read their chosen names out loud, until the 4th woman opened her card, condemned the 63-year-old maid Margaret Hobbs for taking 41 minutes to clean the 3rd floor, and tried to justify her decision with a stopwatch app. That was the exact moment Clara, an invisible maid who had been ignored for 11 months, set down her glass water pitcher with a sharp crack that echoed across the quiet room. Ignoring the arrogant demands of the guests and facing Rosalind directly, Clara revealed that Margaret was the very person who had held Rosalind's head in her lap for 22 agonizing minutes on a freezing night, when Margaret was 60 after a severe fall, staying on the cold floor until the ambulance arrived, and then giving the security guard full credit just to spare the proud matriarch from feeling embarrassed. As tears rolled over Rosalind's trembling hands, and she pushed the silver tray away in absolute shame, this unforgettable confrontation proved that real dignity is never defined by a person's uniform or status. If this powerful story of hidden loyalty touched your heart, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more emotional tales, and drop a comment below to tell us how Clara's brave truth made you feel today. The glass water pitcher struck the wooden tabletop with a dry, sharp sound that carried through the entire room. Camille Wren spun around, the card still pinched between 2 fingers. "What are you doing? Who gave you permission to stand there listening?" No one answered. The woman seated to Camille's left eased her chair back a few inches, as though trying to separate herself from whatever was about to happen. At the doorway, Margaret Hobbs remained exactly where she was, the coffee tray still balanced in her hands. She didn't step forward, and she didn't retreat. She only lowered her head slightly and said in a voice so soft it was barely more than breath, "I'm sorry. I've disturbed everyone. I'll bring the coffee out later." Then she turned, preparing to leave, exactly as she had done for 29 years whenever there were guests in the room. "Mrs. Hobbs," Clara called after her. The old woman stopped. "Please stay. You're not disturbing anyone." Vivian Crane took one step forward, directly into the space between Clara and the table. Her voice was gentle, the way someone might soothe a feverish child. "Miss Shaw, you're serving refreshments. That is the full extent of your job in this room. Step outside for me, and we'll talk later." Clara didn't move. She looked directly at Rosalind Rinaldi, the woman seated at the head of the table with the silver tray in front of her, and spoke 9 words, slowly, no louder than the ordinary voice of someone repeating an address. "She's the woman who saved your mother's life, sir." In English, without the last word, that sentence had only 8 words, and for the next 4 seconds, not a single person in that room moved. In the corner, Vittorio Rinaldi set his wineglass down on the small table beside his chair. He said nothing, but all 5 women heard the sound of glass touching wood, and all 5 understood that from that moment forward, no one was permitted to leave the room unless he allowed it. Rosalind looked up. "What did you just say?" "I'll say it again. But first, I want to ask one question, and I want to ask Miss Wren." Clara turned toward the woman who had just read out the name. "You timed Mrs. Hobbs cleaning the 3rd floor hallway. 41 minutes. Did you write that number down?" Camille raised an eyebrow. "I recorded it on my phone." "Good. Then tell me the next number. How much money does this house save by firing Mrs. Hobbs?" Camille gave a short laugh and glanced around the room, searching for agreement. No one laughed with her. "I don't understand what you're trying to do. I'm asking for a number. You just used a number to condemn someone. I thought you'd be able to answer. This isn't about money. You used a stopwatch. Once you use a stopwatch, it becomes about money." Clara took one step toward the table. "I'll answer it for you then. Mrs. Hobbs is paid $19 an hour. The 41 minutes she spent cleaning that hallway cost this house $13. $13, Miss Wren. That is the entire amount of money your stopwatch managed to uncover in 2 days." Vivian spoke, still in that same soothing voice. "Miss Shaw, if you think that number is small, then you've misunderstood the issue. This is about efficiency." "Yes, this is exactly about efficiency." Clara turned toward Vivian for the first time. "And if numbers are what we're discussing in this room, then I have numbers that are much larger." No one responded. Adrienne Cole set down her glass without taking a drink. Isabella Marchetti looked toward Vittorio, waiting for him to put an end to this, but he did nothing. He simply sat there, both hands resting on the arms of his chair, his eyes never leaving the maid standing in the middle of the room. Rosalind spoke again, and her voice was different now. "Miss Shaw, repeat what you said a moment ago." "I will, but I want you to hear it in the correct order, Mrs. Rinaldi, because if I tell it backward, you won't believe me." Clara rested one hand on the back of the nearest empty chair. "For the past 2 days, these 5 women have been instructed to observe us. They've done it very carefully. They've timed us, taken notes, photographed the duty schedules. No one told them that the 40 people in this house could see them too." Camille rose to her feet. "I didn't come here to be lectured on morality by a servant." "Sit down," Rosalind said. Camille sat down. Vivian stepped another half-step closer, near enough that only Clara was meant to hear her, and her voice was still sweet, still even, but this time there was something very thin and very sharp underneath it. "You're standing on very narrow ground, Miss Shaw. I signed the form that hired you. I can sign another one too." Clara looked at her, and she didn't lower her voice at all when she answered. "I know you can. That's why I intend to say everything today." At the doorway, Mrs. Hobbs set the coffee tray down on the small table against the wall. She straightened her back, let both hands fall to her sides, and for the first time that afternoon, she didn't lower her head. 48 hours, Clara said. "That's how long the 5 of you have been in this house. I have another number for you, and no one needed a stopwatch to arrive at this one. In those 48 hours, not one of the 5 of you said a single word of thanks to any member of the staff. Not very few. None." Sloane Hartley curled one corner of her mouth. "You counted?" "No. If it had happened even once, people would have told each other about it. Strange things travel fast in this house." Clara shifted her gaze to Adrienne Cole. "Saturday night, the small sitting room, around 9 o'clock. A glass of red wine spilled onto the carpet. It didn't spill because someone bumped into it. The staff member standing in the hallway saw you tilt your hand. Then you took out your phone and started the timer." Adrienne opened her mouth, then closed it again. 4 minutes and 10 seconds, Clara said. "That's how long it took for someone to come clean it. I don't know who you intended to grade with that number, but the woman who came to clean it had been working since 6 o'clock that morning. She knelt over that carpet for 15 minutes. Did you put those 15 minutes into your phone too?" No one answered. Vivian Crane spoke, her voice still gentle. "Miss Shaw, minor household incidents are outside the scope of this meeting." "Yes, I understand. Then I'll talk about something that isn't minor." Clara turned fully toward the head of the table. "Mrs. Rinaldi, the name that was read aloud a moment ago was Margaret Hobbs. I want to tell you about a night 3 years ago, the night of November 7th, 2:15 in the morning. You fell in the second-floor hallway near the west staircase." Rosalind Rinaldi's head snapped up. "You were told that the night security guard found you. You've believed that for 3 years. But the night guard was on the other side of the property that night, at the side gate. And he only came running when he heard someone calling. The person who found you was Mrs. Hobbs. She went up to the second floor at 2 o'clock, because she always finished cleaning the 3rd floor before coming down. She did it that way every night." Rosalind said nothing. Her hand rested on the tabletop beside the silver tray, and she didn't pull it back. She was 60 years old then. She couldn't lift you, and she knew she wasn't supposed to drag someone who had just fallen. So she sat down on the floor, placed your head in her lap, and stayed exactly like that. She held you there for 22 minutes until the ambulance reached the gate. She didn't get up once, not even when her legs went numb. Vittorio Rinaldi rose to his feet. He didn't step forward, and he didn't say anything. He simply stood there, and the entire room heard the sound of his chair scraping across the floor. "Then, she told the night security guard to say that he was the one who found you," Clara continued. "I asked her why. She said the lady of the house was a decent woman, and she didn't want her to feel ashamed, because a woman who scrubbed floors had seen her lying on the ground in her nightgown." Rosalind lifted a hand to her mouth. "For 3 years you've walked past her every day, on the main staircase, in the 3rd floor hallway, by the garden entrance. I counted at least 4 times a day. You never once asked her name." Rosalind made no sound. Her hand remained pressed over her mouth, and her shoulders began to tremble in short waves, as though she were trying to swallow down a cough. Tears ran over the back of her hand. None of the 5 women dared look directly at her. Camille Wren lowered her eyes to the card in her hand. At the doorway, Mrs. Hobbs was still standing straight, both arms at her sides, her eyes lowered toward the floor, and she didn't say a single word. Vivian stepped beside Rosalind and placed a hand on the back of her chair. "Mrs. Rinaldi, I think we should pause. You need to rest." "Take your hand off me," Rosalind said. Vivian withdrew it. Rosalind sat motionless for another moment, then lowered her hand from her mouth and placed it on the table. Her voice broke in the middle of the sentence, but she finished it anyway. When I was 17, I cleaned hotel rooms. Isabella Marchetti looked up. The Parker House Hotel. I worked there for 3 summers and 1 winter. 14 rooms every day. I changed sheets, scrubbed bathtubs, picked up wet towels people threw on the floor. She looked down at the silver tray in front of her. For 49 years, I haven't told anyone that story. My husband doesn't know. My son doesn't know. I hid it so well that there were times I almost convinced myself it had never happened. Rosalind raised her head and looked around the table, at the 5 women, and then at the tray. And I just sat here, at this very table. I told 5 young women to go through my house and find out whether there was anyone here we could afford to let go. No one spoke. Rosalind pushed the silver tray away from herself, slowly, until it touched the edge of the table, and stopped. Then she said, without looking at anyone, "Miss Shaw, do you have any more numbers?" "Yes, ma'am," Clara said. "A lot more, Miss Shaw." Vivian Crane stepped into the middle of the room, positioning herself exactly where every pair of eyes had to pass over her to reach Clara. "You've said enough, Mrs. Rinaldi has just been through something deeply unpleasant, and I think everyone here can see that you crossed the boundaries of your duties 20 minutes ago." Her voice wasn't even slightly louder than it had been while she was pouring coffee. "Go outside. I'll deal with this with you later. Properly." Clara walked to the table, picked up the silver tray, and drew out 1 white card. "Mrs. Rinaldi said 1 name from each person." She placed the card down in front of herself. "I'm part of this house, too. I have a name of my own." "You weren't invited," Vivian said. "None of the 40 people who work here were invited. But this is a list of those 40 people, and I'm on that list." Clara picked up the pen lying on the tray, wrote something, then raised the card and read aloud, "Vivian Crane." A small sound escaped Adrian Cole's throat. No one else moved. "I'm choosing the person who is costing this house the most money," Clara said. Vivian smiled, and nothing about that smile changed on her face. "Do you understand what you've just done?" "I do. That's why I brought 2 numbers with me." Clara set the card down on the table. "First, the laundry contractor sends a monthly invoice for 640 sets of bed linens. I'm the one who changes the sheets on the 2nd and 3rd floors. There are 19 bedrooms in this house, and 11 of them aren't slept in at any point during the year. The linens are changed twice a week in occupied rooms, once a month in empty rooms. The actual number of sets leaving this house every month is 180. I didn't calculate that from the books. I calculated it from the number of times I carry the baskets down to the basement." Rosalind looked up. Vivian never took her eyes off Clara. "Second," Clara said. "Last month's payroll was posted on the employee break room bulletin board, as required. There were 2 names on it that I've never seen before. I don't mean I don't remember their faces. I mean I've never seen them. I clean every room in this house, including the storage rooms, the security break room, even the garage. In 11 months, I haven't seen either of those people once." I asked the head cook. "She hasn't seen them either." "Are you finished?" Vivian asked. "That's everything I can say in this room. The rest is in records I'm not authorized to open." Vivian nodded slowly, like someone who had just listened to a complaint about the temperature in the room. Then she turned toward Vittorio Rinaldi. "Sir, I'd like permission to say something I should probably have kept private." She didn't pull out any papers. She didn't open her phone. She simply spoke. "Miss Shaw currently has 3 overdue debts. Together they total $9,800. 1 is for funeral expenses she put on a credit card 4 years ago. 1 is the remaining balance on a student loan she still hasn't paid off. The 3rd is a second credit card she opened to pay the interest on the other 2. Vivian turned back to Clara. "I know because I'm the one who reviews personnel files in this house, and I hired you despite knowing all of that. I'm not saying this to humiliate you. I'm saying it so everyone here understands that when someone who owes $9,800 stands up and accuses the person responsible for managing the budget, there is usually a reason." No one spoke. Clara didn't look away, and she didn't answer. Vittorio Rinaldi remained silent for 4 seconds. He looked at Clara for all 4 of them. Then he spoke, and they were the first words he had said all afternoon. "You'll be out of this house before 6 o'clock this evening." Rosalind turned sharply toward her son. Vivian lowered her head, ever so slightly. Camille Wren exhaled. Clara didn't beg, didn't ask why, didn't look toward Rosalind for rescue. She lifted the water pitcher from the table, carried it across the room, past Mrs. Hobbs standing in the doorway, and took it down to the kitchen, where she returned it to its proper place. When she came back to the sitting room doorway, she stopped for a single beat. "The first day these 5 women arrived, someone asked you what you wanted in a wife." She spoke to Vittorio without raising her voice. You said you wanted someone who wouldn't lie to you. You just fired exactly that person." Then she walked away. No one said anything for the next 10 seconds. Vivian gathered the 5 cards on the table into a neat stack, placed the card bearing her own name at the very bottom, and told the 5 women that dinner would be served at 7 o'clock. Rosalind Rinaldi rose from her chair, bracing one hand against the table. "The kitchen," she said. Vivian turned back. "Tell her she can stay tonight. One night. She has nowhere to go at 6 o'clock in the evening, and I won't have someone leave my house like that." "Ma'am, Mr. Rinaldi my son gives orders to his people. The servants' quarters belong to me." She looked at Vittorio. He didn't object. "One night," Rosalind repeated. "Then she leaves tomorrow morning." At 6:10 the next morning, the morning shift inventory clerk opened the basement security room with his access card and found the inner safe door standing slightly ajar. $400,000 in cash was missing from the safe. 15 minutes later, the entire estate was locked down. No one was allowed through the gates, including the 5 women who were still in the breakfast room. Dante Russo arrived before 7 o'clock. He didn't ask a single question when he entered the courtyard. He only signaled for the 2 men following him to split off in opposite directions, and all 40 members of the household staff immediately stepped aside to clear his path. The search began in the vehicle area. By 7:20, one of Dante's men came out of the garage carrying a canvas bag and set it down on the courtyard stones in front of him. The bag of money had been found inside the toolbox behind the vehicle Walter Pruitt always used. Walter Pruitt was 61 years old. He had driven for the family for 29 years, and for the past 4 years he had walked with a crutch braced against his left side after an accident on Highway 1A. They called him out into the courtyard. He came slowly from the staff quarters, his right hand gripping the crutch, and as he passed, the line of employees crowded along the walkway. Not one of them raised their eyes to look at him. It wasn't because they believed he was guilty. It was because they knew what was about to happen, and they knew that looking at him now wouldn't help. Dante opened the canvas bag right there in the middle of the courtyard so Walter could see inside. "Explain this." "I didn't take it," Walter said. "The money was in your vehicle." "I know it was in my vehicle. I just saw it sitting in my vehicle." He didn't raise his voice, didn't wave his hands, didn't beg. "I don't have an access card to that room. I haven't had one once in 29 years. "Everyone says that," Dante said. Vittorio Rinaldi came down the steps and stopped about 4 paces from the 2 men. He said nothing. Dante turned toward him. "Sir, this doesn't need to leave the property. $400,000 in cash inside the house. If we bring the police in, they'll ask where that money came from, and then they'll keep asking questions. I'll handle it the family way. It'll be finished today." Vittorio didn't answer. Vivian Crane stood at the top of the steps, both hands folded in front of her, and spoke in a calm voice. "I checked the access log from 6 o'clock last night until 6 o'clock this morning. Aside from the scheduled shift, the security room door was opened only once, at 11:49 last night. I'll print the record for you." Walter turned his head toward Vittorio and looked directly at him. 29 years. No one said anything. "I drove your father for 11 years. I drove you for another 8 eggs down. I took your mother to the hospital 3 times a week during her final year. I drove Mrs. Rinaldi to Mass every Sunday morning, even the morning after I got out of the hospital." He shifted the crutch into his other hand. 29 years. Count every one of them again. Then tell me which year I took 1 cent from this family." Vittorio still said nothing. Dante signaled for 2 men to step forward. "Take him to the storage building. No one talks to him." Near the gate, about 130 feet away, Clara Shaw was walking out with a canvas bag over one shoulder and a paper bag of belongings in one hand. She had returned her room key, signed the uniform return log, and the gate guard had already opened the small side door for her. She had taken 3 steps beyond the gate when she stopped. She stood still for about 5 seconds, then turned her head toward the courtyard, where 2 men were escorting Walter Pruitt toward the storage building, his crutch striking the gravel 1 beat at a time. Then she set both bags down on the roadside. The gate guard called after her, "Miss Shaw, you've already signed out. I can't open the gate again." Clara didn't answer him. She walked back through the small side door before it had fully closed, crossed the courtyard, went straight past Dante Russo, and stopped in front of Vittorio Rinaldi. Vivian Crane stepped down 1 stair. "Miss Shaw, you no longer work here." "I know," Clara said. She looked at Vittorio. "I have 3 things to say about that bag of money. All 3 can be seen with the naked eye, and all 3 take less than 2 minutes to check." Dante stepped forward. "Sir, this has nothing to do with..." Vittorio raised 1 hand. That was all. Dante stopped. Vittorio looked at Clara. "Speak." Clara pointed to the canvas bag that was still lying open on the ground. "First, Have them open the bag and look at how the money is bundled. Dante bent down and folded back the edge of the bag. Inside were stacks of $100 bills, each stack wrapped twice with brown rubber bands. The cash in this house isn't bundled like that, Clara said. I clean the security room every Tuesday. I don't open the safe, but I've seen it opened in front of me many times, because no one thinks the woman cleaning the floor needs to be sent away. The money inside is wrapped with bank straps, mustard-colored. Mustard means a denomination of $10,000. Every bundle has the branch name and the date it was strapped printed on it. There isn't a single paper bank strap in this bag. Dante straightened. He removed them. Maybe 40 bundles, all unwrapped. Then every single one wrapped again with rubber bands. Then all 40 paper straps with the bank's name printed on them hidden somewhere else. Let's say he managed to do all that. Then explain to me why he would go to that much trouble only to leave the entire $400,000 sitting in his own vehicle. No one answered. Second, Clara said. Mrs. Crane just said the access log shows the security room door opening at 11:49 last night. Then there should be video. Pull up the footage. Vivian spoke from the steps, her voice still even. There was a signal failure in the system last night. I've documented it, and I'll report it to maintenance. How long did the failure last? 6 minutes. 6 minutes, Clara repeated. From what time to what time? Vivian didn't answer immediately. I'd have to check. I think it began around 11:47. Clara turned toward Vittorio. But that isn't what I want you to notice. What I want you to notice is where the recording server is located. It isn't in the equipment room. It's inside the security room itself, on the metal rack directly to the left of the safe. I clean that rack every Tuesday. Dante turned his head toward the basement door, which means anyone who can enter that room can reach both the safe and the recording server at the same time, Clara said. Whoever took the money didn't need to shut the cameras down remotely. They only had to stand right there. And there is only one person in this house who approves the camera maintenance schedule. One person who decides when the system is allowed to go offline for upgrades. Vittorio looked up toward the steps. Vivian stood motionless, both hands still folded in front of her. Third, Clara turned and pointed toward the basement door on the far side of the courtyard. Measure the distance from that door to the vehicle for me. Down one flight of 14 stairs, through the hallway, up another flight of stairs to reach the courtyard. Then almost 330 feet across gravel, with the last stretch climbing uphill toward the parking area. She looked at Dante. $400,000 in $100 bills weighs about 9 pounds. This bag weighs more because of the bag itself. Mr. Pruitt walks with one hand while the other holds his crutch. Try carrying that bag the entire distance with one hand, over gravel, at 11 o'clock at night, without making a sound. Dante said nothing. He looked down at Walter's crutch, then across the gravel courtyard. Walter Pruitt stood perfectly still between the two men holding him. He didn't say another word, didn't look at Clara, didn't look at anyone. Vittorio Rinaldi was silent for about 5 seconds. Then he spoke to the two men beside Walter. Take your hands off him. They let go. Mr. Pruitt goes back to his room. No one enters his room, and no one asks him a single question until I say otherwise. He turned to Dante. Seal the money bag. No one touches it. Not the bag, and not a single bundle inside. Dante gave one nod, then signaled to his men. Walter made his way back toward the staff quarters on his crutch, and this time, people lifted their eyes to look at him. Vivian came all the way down the steps. Sir, I'll have the complete system logs printed and brought to your office this morning. Print them, Vittorio said. She nodded, turned, and went inside through the side door that led down toward the basement corridor. Clara picked up her 2 bags from the roadside and walked around the back of the house toward the service gate, because the main gate had been closed. That route took her through the lower corridor, along the section connecting the kitchen wing to the basement stairs. She reached the corner and saw Vivian Crane standing alone about 50 feet away, her back turned, beneath the light at the far end of the hallway. Vivian lifted one hand to the front of her blouse, and in that hand was an access card. Clara saw it clearly for about 2 seconds before it disappeared into Vivian's pocket. The staff access cards in this house were gray, printed with a name and photograph, with a punched hole in one corner for a lanyard. That card was white, blank, with no name, no photograph, and no hole. Clara didn't cry out. She stepped back half a pace into the darkness around the corner and remained still until Vivian disappeared from sight. Her father had taught her what happened to a person who had nothing when that person accused someone who had everything, and he had paid for that lesson with his entire life. Clara waited another minute before continuing toward the service gate. The black car pulled over about 65 feet from the bus stop, and Vittorio Rinaldi got out alone. Clara was sitting on the bench with her 2 bags at her feet. Where are you going? Back to my apartment in Quincy. I still have it. He stood there for a moment. 12 of my men were in that courtyard all morning. Not one of them said any of the 3 things you said. You saw what 12 of my men didn't. Who chose those 12 men? Vittorio didn't answer right away. Think about it and answer me later, Clara said. I'm asking because I've been asking myself the same question since last night. Mrs. Crane doesn't choose my men. She doesn't choose your men. She chooses the camera maintenance schedule, chooses the personnel files, chooses who is issued which access card, chooses which invoices reach your desk, and which ones don't. If you want to find the person who took $400,000, you're looking in the right direction. But $400,000 isn't the largest amount of money that has left your house. He looked at her. What evidence do you have for that? None yet. Then why should I believe you? You don't have to believe me. You only have to let me open the books. If I'm wrong, you've lost a few days of work from someone you've already fired. Vittorio sat down at the far end of the bench. What do you want? 3 things. If even one is missing, I get on that bus. Say them. First, Mr. Pruitt keeps his full salary and his housing for the entire investigation. No cuts, no suspension, no reduction. Even if he is still under suspicion at the end, if he really is guilty, then you deal with him then. Until that happens, he gets paid exactly as he has for the past 29 years. Agreed. Second, I get access to 9 years of records, not just household expenses, payroll, contractor agreements, repair invoices, and the books for the 2 legitimate companies that carry your family name, the textile company and the construction company. Vittorio was silent longer this time. You know about those 2 companies. Everyone knows. They have signs out on the street. Agreed. Third, and this is the one I won't compromise on, Mrs. Crane doesn't get to decide which documents I see. She doesn't approve the list, doesn't choose which boxes are sent out and which stay behind, and she doesn't stand in the room while the records are being packed. If she touches anything in those files before I see it, then everything I find becomes meaningless. Who packs them? Your people, not hers. And you give me the name of every person involved. Vittorio nodded once. Agreed to all 3. When you say agreed, does that mean agreed? Or agreed until it becomes inconvenient? When I say agreed, it's agreed. Clara looked at him for about 3 seconds, then bent down and pulled the zipper closed on the canvas bag. Then there's one more thing, and this isn't a condition. I won't work inside your house. The records are in my house. Where the records are is your decision. Where I sit is mine. She stood. There are 40 people in your house, and 39 of them watched me sign the uniform return log last night. If I walk back in this morning and sit in your study with a stack of files in front of me, by noon the entire house will have one story, and by evening Mrs. Crane will have a better one. I don't want to argue with a story. I want to argue with numbers. Then where do you sit? I have a place. A laundromat in Charlestown, on Bunker Hill Street. The owner is Mrs. Nolan. I've been doing mending and clothing repairs for her for 2 years. There's a storage room behind the shop with a long table, a door that locks, and a light. She'll let me use it if I pay rent. I'll pay. No, I'll pay. Clara swung the bag over her shoulder. If you pay the rent for the room where I work, then that room belongs to you. I want you to understand clearly that when you walk into it, you're a guest. Vittorio rose from the bench. The records will be there today. 9 years is a lot of boxes. I know. He turned toward the car, then stopped. Anything else? Yes. Don't tell Mrs. Crane where the records are going. Let her know they're leaving the house, but don't tell her where they're being taken. Vittorio didn't ask why. He only nodded and got into the car. 22 boxes of records were delivered that day, and 4 more arrived the following morning. Clara arranged them by year along the inner wall, and started with the simplest thing, the papers that sat beside one another. On the 3rd day, she called Vittorio over. 3 sets of invoices were already spread across the long table. 3 contractors, she said. Laundry, landscaping, and roof maintenance. 3 different companies, 3 different addresses, 3 different phone numbers. She pushed 3 invoices closer together. Look at the footer. Vittorio leaned down. Same typeface, Clara said. Not similar, the exact same one. Font size, line spacing, placement of the periods, even the extra space before the word total. 3 companies that have nothing to do with one another don't use the same invoice template, with the exact same mistake. She turned to the signature section, and these are 3 signatures from 3 different representatives. Look at the little hook at the bottom of each one. Vittorio studied them for a long time. Same hand. I'm not a handwriting expert, so I won't claim that for certain, but I found this. She handed him 3 printouts from the state's business registry. All 3 companies registered for tax identification numbers in the same week, in March of 2017. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Who brought these 3 contractors into my house? There's a line in the records saying they were recommended by household management. You can verify that yourself. I'm not guessing. 4 days later, she called him over a second time. This time, 9 years of payroll records covered the table, stacked separately by year. I did this the way a cleaner would, she said. I didn't start by reading the books. I made a list of every person I had ever seen in that house during the 11 months I worked there. Then I compared that list against payroll. She rested her hand on a handwritten sheet of paper. There are 7 names receiving regular paychecks, whose faces I've never seen. I asked the head cook, the head of the security shift, and Mrs. Hobbs. Between the 3 of them, they've worked there for 47 years. None of them recognizes these 7 names. They could work nights. There are 8 people on the night shift. I know all 8 of their faces. They could be seasonal grounds workers. Seasonal workers are paid under contract. They don't stay on monthly payroll continuously for 9 years. She pulled 2 sheets from the stack, and I was able to trace 2 of those 7 names. Vittorio picked up the 2 pages. I spent 4 evenings at the Baden Public Library. The first person, Mr. Raymond Teague, died in August of 2019. His obituary ran in the local paper, with the funeral home named in it. The second, Mrs. Eileen Sarno, died in January of 2020. She placed a finger on the date column in the payroll records. Mr. Teague continued receiving pay for another 14 months after he died. Mrs. Sarno did too, exactly 14 months. Vittorio lowered the 2 pages onto the table. He didn't say anything for a while. 14 months for both, he finally said, the same length of time. Whoever is doing this isn't monitoring each person individually. This person sets up recurring transfers and lets them run, then reviews them every 14 months to clean things up. Vittorio looked down at the 2 names. Anything else? Yes, but the next part is heavier. You should sit down. He sat. Clara brought 2 more record boxes from the corner of the room, one from the textile company and one from the construction company. These 2 companies have 40 full-time employees. Those 40 people have pension funds, and under federal law, those funds have to be kept separate from the company's operating money. Money in a pension fund doesn't belong to the company. It belongs to those 40 people. She opened a stack of statements. Starting in 2018, money began leaving both funds in separate withdrawals, each one listed as fund management expenses. The smallest was $9,000. The largest was $210,000. Look at the names of the recipients. Vittorio read them. They're the same 3 contractors from before, Clara said. A laundry company is receiving pension fund management fees from a textile company. He didn't answer. She turned to the final page of the statements. As of last month, the 2 funds have a combined balance of $4,200, 40 people, 9 years of contributions, and $4,200 left. Clara slid a single handwritten sheet across the table toward him. It contained nothing but 1 column of numbers. This is the total. Fraudulent invoices from the 3 contractors, salaries paid to 7 people who don't exist, and money withdrawn from the 2 pension funds. 9 years. Vittorio looked at the number on the final line. $14,200,000. He sat motionless for a very long time. He didn't strike the table, didn't ask her to repeat it, didn't say a single word about how he felt. Did you check it again? 3 times. This is the number I'm certain of. It may be higher. It can't be lower. Who approved these payments? Clara rested her hand on the stack of records and didn't answer immediately. Some were approved by 1 person. Some were approved by 2. Who was the second person? Go home and get some rest. I'll answer that tomorrow. Vittorio arrived at the storage room at 6 o'clock the following evening, about 40 minutes earlier than they had agreed, and he stopped at the doorway because Clara wasn't alone. 2 women were sitting at the far end of the table, folding clothes that had already been washed into neat stacks and placing them into baskets. One was around 60, the other much younger. Clara opened a metal tin, counted out cash into 2 portions, and pushed one toward each woman. Mrs. Kearns, 3.5 hours, and Tuesday was 2 hours. So I added that in too. The older woman took the money, folded it, slipped it into her coat pocket, and thanked her. The younger woman counted hers once before accepting it. The 2 women carried their baskets out through the back door, passing Vittorio on the way, and neither of them looked up at him. Clara closed the lid of the tin and put it away in a drawer. You're 40 minutes early. Those 2 women work for you? They work with me, Mrs. Nolan takes laundry orders from 3 restaurants. I handle the mending and folding. I can't do all of it myself, so I hire them by the hour. She pulled out a chair. They're both better at it than I am. Mrs. Kearns was let go by her old company last year because she's 63 and can't stay on her feet for long anymore. The younger one can't get hired anywhere because there's one line on her record she can't erase. Vittorio looked toward the drawer. You pay them before you pay yourself. I pay them before I pay my rent. Every month. Why? Because they've already done the work. Their wages belong to them. It isn't money I'm holding on their behalf. She sat down. You ask that as if I'm doing them a favor. I'm paying them for their labor. Keeping someone without paying them is called charity. And charity given to the wrong person can turn into chains. Vittorio pulled out a chair and sat across from her. He didn't answer that. Yesterday you said some payments had 2 signatures. They did, but that's not what I'm talking about today. She opened a file much thinner than the ones from the day before. I did something else. I didn't look at who signed anything. I only looked at the dates. I took every irregular payment from the past 9 years, arranged them by date, and drew them into a line. She placed a hand-drawn sheet on the table, a jagged line running across the page. It stays steady for 9 years. Every month there are some, 2 in a quiet month, 7 or 8 in a busy one. Except here, her finger stopped at a blank stretch in the middle of the page. Here it stops completely, not a single payment. For 6 straight weeks. Vittorio looked down at the empty stretch. After those 6 weeks, it starts again, and it comes back stronger than before. Clara looked up. I want to ask you something, and if you can answer it, answer me. Ask. What year did your wife die? Vittorio didn't answer immediately. He kept looking at the paper for a while. 4 years ago. September. What day? The 19th. Clara picked up a pen, wrote the date in the margin of the page, then set the pen down. This gap begins on August 8th. It ends on September 26th. Neither of them spoke for a moment. For 6 weeks before September 19th, every irregular payment in your household records stops. Completely. Not one slips through. Then, 1 week after the funeral, they start again. Vittorio placed both hands on the table. Say clearly what you're telling me. I can only tell you what I see on the paper. I see someone stop taking money for 6 weeks. People stop for one of 2 reasons. Either they can't take it anymore, or they know someone is watching. She turned the sheet over. On the back was a short, handwritten list. If it's the first reason, then something in the house had to change during those 6 weeks. A different bank, different software, a different person signing. I checked all of it. Same bank, same software, same signer. Nothing changed. Then it's the second reason. Then someone was watching, and that person stopped watching after September 26th. Vittorio sat motionless for a very long time. He didn't ask another question about his wife, didn't tell Clara anything about her, didn't mention her name even once. Do you know what she was doing during those 6 weeks? No, that isn't in these papers. That's in your house. He stood up. Where are you going? Home to ask my mother. She was in that house for all 6 of those weeks. Don't ask her today. Clara stood as well. By the time you get home, it'll be 9 o'clock at night. You ask your mother a question like that at 9, and by 10 the entire house will know you're asking. Wait until morning, and ask her somewhere no one can walk past. Vittorio stopped at the door. You think someone in my house is listening. I think someone in your house knows what you're going to ask before you ask it. He nodded once, then opened the door. One more thing, Clara said. Yesterday you asked me who the second signer was. Read the payment authorizations, from 2021 onward again. Read them alone. Don't ask anyone to bring the files to you. Vittorio never got the chance to ask his mother a single question. At 7 o'clock the next morning, when he reached the ground floor, the large dining room had already been cleared, and the long table had been rearranged. Dante Russo sat on the left side. 4 other men were seated along the table, men who normally came to the house only 3 or 4 times a year. Vivian Crane stood at the far end, with 3 folders stacked in front of her. Who called this meeting? Vittorio asked. I did, Vivian said. Under the household management charter, when family property is removed from the house without a written record, I have the authority to notify the council. 26 boxes of records left this house last week. No one in this room knows where they are. Dante didn't look at Vittorio. He looked down at the tabletop. Vittorio pulled out a chair and sat. And no one spoke until he had settled into it. Vivian opened the first folder. Before we discuss the books, I want the council to understand whose word it is being asked to trust. She removed a sheet of paper and placed it in the center of the table. This is the original, not a copy. The man sitting closest pulled the page toward him. A signed statement of responsibility from Thomas Delaney, former chief accountant for this family, signed on September 14th, 4 years ago. He admitted to withdrawing $2,400,000 from family accounts over a period of 4 years. It bears his signature, the date, and the signatures of 2 witnesses. both of whom are sitting in this room. Two men near the middle of the table nodded. The paper moved slowly around the table, and no one passed without reading it. The person, Mr. Rinaldi, has given access to all 9 years of financial records, Vivian said. Is that man's daughter? No one spoke. Dante looked up for the first time. Vittorio said nothing. She entered this house using her mother's surname, Clara Shaw. The name on her birth certificate is Clara Delaney. Vivian closed the first folder and rested one hand on it. I'm not saying she lied about the numbers. I haven't seen those numbers because no one has allowed me to see them. I'm only saying that the one person who has been allowed to examine them has a personal reason to find another name to place beside the one written on this page. A man at the far end of the table said, "Why didn't you know this when you hired her?" "I did know," Vivian replied. "I hired her anyway because I believed a young woman who had lost her father needed a place to work. I accept responsibility for that. And whatever action the council chooses to take against me, I'll accept it. But I won't accept responsibility for allowing her to sit alone with the family's records at an address none of us knows." Vittorio remained silent. Vivian opened the second folder. "Now we come to the reason I had to call all of you here today." She placed 2 letters on the table. The family's attorney received these 11 days ago. A federal grand jury in Boston is collecting documents related to the 2 companies bearing the family name, the textile company and the construction company. The second letter is a document preservation order. That means that from the day it was received, every record belonging to those 2 companies was required to remain in place, under the custody of a designated person, with a record of exactly who touched what. Dante looked at Vittorio. "Did you know about this, sir?" Vittorio didn't answer. 26 boxes of records were removed from the house after the preservation order was received, Vivian said. They are now being kept at a location that appears in no official record, in the custody of someone who is not an employee of the family, and that person is the daughter of the man who signed the statement that just went around this table. If the prosecutors learn that, they won't need to prove who took the money anymore. They only need to prove that we removed records from controlled custody after receiving a preservation order. That is a separate offense, and it doesn't require a single one of the financial figures. The man at the end of the table pushed his chair back. "Bring the records back. Today, not just bring them back," another man said. "There needs to be a written record of who had them, how long they had them, and who read what during that time." Vivian nodded. "Exactly. And I'll say plainly what no one in this room wants to say. Opening 9 years of books right now, while a federal preservation order is sitting on the family's lawyer's desk, isn't searching for the truth. It's handing ourselves over." No one objected. Dante said, "I don't know the woman, but Mrs. Crane is correct about the procedure." 2 others nodded. Vittorio placed one hand on the table. He still hadn't spoken a word since his opening question. Vivian looked at him, then slowly around the table. "I could stop here," she said. "The council already has sufficient grounds to order the immediate return of the records, and I believe that should happen today." Then she placed her hand on the 3rd folder, the one that had not yet been opened, and left it there. "But there is one more matter, and I'll let Mr. Rinaldi decide whether he wants to hear it in front of everyone." Vivian opened the 3rd folder and took out 2 sheets of paper, placing them side by side on the table, exactly 1 handspan apart. The sheet on the left is the employment application submitted to this house 11 months ago. The name given is Clara Shaw. The sheet on the right is a certified birth record from the State Department of Health. Clara Delaney, born in Quincy. Father Thomas Delaney. She stepped back half a pace so everyone could see both documents. She falsified her application to get into this house. She is the daughter of the man who stole from all of you. The dining room door opened. Clara stood in the doorway, with a document case tucked under one arm. Rosalind Rinaldi stood directly behind her. "My son told me to invite her here," Rosalind said to Vittorio. "At 6 o'clock this morning, before anyone called this meeting." No one stood. Clara walked in and stopped at the far end of the table, opposite Vivian, about 3 steps from where Vittorio was sitting. She looked down at the 2 sheets of paper on the table. "The one on the right is real," she said. "The one on the left is real too, except for the surname." Dante Russo turned his chair toward her. "You admit it?" "I admit it. I put my mother's surname on the application. I knew it was a false statement, and I know that alone is enough for you to fire me a second time." She set the document case on the edge of the table but didn't open it. "I changed my name because no one in this city would hire his daughter. I tried for 14 months. I applied to accounting offices first, then service companies, then hotels, and finally private households. Every time I reached the background check, it stopped there. No one ever said why, and they didn't need to. The name Delaney in this city had already become an answer all by itself. No one interrupted her. "My father was Thomas Delaney," He worked as an accountant for this family for 19 years. 4 years ago, he was declared responsible for taking $2,400,000. He left this house in a single day, moved into a rented apartment in Quincy, and 11 weeks later he died there of a heart attack. They found him 2 days later. I paid for the funeral on a credit card, and you've already heard about that debt. She looked around the table once. At the time, I had 1 semester left before graduating in accounting from the University of Massachusetts, Boston. I didn't go back to school. I went to work to pay the debt. Vivian spoke, her voice still no louder than usual. And what did you come into this house to do? To find documents. Clara didn't avoid the question. I'm not hiding that from anyone sitting here. I came in to find the real numbers because I believed my father. And belief isn't worth anything by itself. You were here 11 months, Dante said. What did you find in 11 months? Nothing. Vivian tilted her head slightly. Say that again. In 11 months, I didn't find a single document, Clara said, because I cleaned 46 rooms in that house, and everything containing the real numbers was behind exactly one door. Mrs. Crane's office door. That door is locked by access card. Cleaning staff don't have access to it. Household accounts, original payroll records, contractor agreements, personnel files, all of it sits behind that door, and the person who approves who is allowed inside is also the person sitting behind it. She turned toward Vittorio. You asked me at the bus stop why 12 of your men didn't see what I saw. The answer is the same. Vivian said. You're answering a question no one asked. The question is why this council should trust someone who lied on the very first line of her employment application. You don't have to trust me. Clara opened the document case and placed a thick stack of papers on the table. The name on my employment application is the only thing I lied about. Every number I've given you is real, and you can verify every single one without me. She pushed the stack toward the middle of the table. There are 3 corporate tax identification numbers in here. You can check them through the state's business portal. It takes 4 minutes, and you don't need a lawyer. There are the names and dates of death of 2 people who continued receiving wages for 14 months after they died. You can check their obituaries in the newspaper. It takes 10 minutes. There are the final balances of the 2 pension funds, and for those you can call the banks holding the funds directly, and they'll read the balances to you over the phone. No one touched the stack of papers. I am the daughter of the man named on that other document, Clara said. That doesn't make 3 shell companies become real companies. If you check everything and find out I invented any of it, then you can deal with me for both things. The man at the far end of the table spoke to Vivian, not Clara. You said there is a document preservation order. There is, Vivian replied. Then until we know what's true and what isn't, the records come back here, get locked up, sealed, and no one reads another page. Not her, not you, not me. 3 men around the table nodded. Dante looked toward Vittorio. Vittorio looked at the stack of papers lying untouched in the middle of the table, and he still said nothing. Vittorio stood up. The council is adjourned. I'll give you my answer today. One by one, the others left the room. Vivian gathered the 3 folders, walked out last, and closed the door behind her. Only 2 people remained in the dining room. Vittorio said, Mr. Pruitt is still receiving his full salary. I told accounting this morning, before this meeting. I know, he sent me a message. You still have the right to review the records. I'm not withdrawing the second condition. And Mrs. Crane still doesn't get to decide what you see. The 3 conditions you gave me, I'm keeping all 3. Yes, I need you to do something. Clara rested one hand on her stack of papers. Say it. Withdraw the accusation. Publicly. In front of the council. Today. She didn't answer immediately. You want me to say I was wrong. I want time. How much? Until after the grand jury proceedings. Maybe 4 months. Maybe 9. And then what? Then we reopen everything. All of it. With lawyers. With outside people. And we do it properly. Clara nodded slowly. And between now and then, Mrs. Crane keeps signing payroll. Keeps approving contracts. Keeps holding the access card to that room. I'll have people watching her. Your people. Or people who are yours but whose faces she's known for 14 years. Vittorio didn't argue. Do you know what my father was given? Clara said. Time. He told people there were 2 sets of books. They told him to wait. That they needed to look into it carefully. That they wanted to do it properly. 3 weeks. And at the end of those 3 weeks, what they put in front of him wasn't an investigation. It was a piece of paper for him to sign. I'm not those people. Not yet. But you're doing exactly what they did. And you're calling it by a nicer name. She pulled the stack of papers closer to herself. This morning, in this room, you didn't break a single promise you made me. You kept all 3. Then you asked me to stand in front of 6 men and say that I made everything up. Do you understand that after I say that, those 3 promises become worthless? Who is going to read a file submitted by the person who has just publicly admitted she invented the whole thing? You will. No one else will. That's the problem. Vittorio stood motionless at the head of the table. What do you want me to do today? Suspend her? There are 40 people in that house. She signs payroll for all 40 of them. You gave me a number. I'm not denying that number. But I can't turn the entire house upside down during the same week a federal preservation order is sitting on my attorney's desk. You don't have to turn anything upside down. You only have to change the lock on one door and give the key to someone else. That takes 40 minutes. He didn't answer. Do you know why you won't do it? Clara said. Because if you change that lock, she'll know, and you're not ready for her to know. I'm weighing the cost. I know. You weigh it very carefully. She began arranging the papers back into a neat stack. Have you noticed that you only weigh things in one direction? The day Mr. Pruitt was led across the courtyard on a crutch. No one said we needed time. They said it would be handled that day. The day you ordered me out of the house by 6 o'clock, no one said we should wait. Every time a decision hurts someone weaker, you call it necessary. The moment it touches Mrs. Crane, you call it caution. Vittorio said. You're angry. I'm calculating. I've been angry for 4 years, and it hasn't helped me once. She tied a cord around the file. I'm not withdrawing it, Mr. Rinaldi. Not because I want to beat you. Because if I stand up and say I invented this, then the paper bearing my father's signature becomes true forever. And I become the last person to sign off on that truth. If you don't withdraw it, the council will reclaim the records today. Then let them. You'll have nothing. I had nothing when I entered your house 11 months ago. Clara picked up the file. The papers in here are my handwritten notes. The originals are in those 26 boxes. You can take them back and lock them away. I'm not keeping a single document that belongs to your family. And if the prosecutors ask, you'll be able to tell them exactly that. She walked toward the door. Vittorio remained where he was. Miss Delaney. She stopped but didn't turn around. I haven't said I don't believe you. You haven't said you do either. She opened the door. The difference between those 2 things is exactly 1 piece of paper. And I already have that piece of paper. Clara walked down the hallway, out through the front door, and no one in the house said a single word to her until she was beyond the gate. Vittorio remained standing in the empty dining room. He didn't call after her, didn't send anyone to accompany her, and didn't say anything more to anyone for the rest of that morning. They came to collect the 26 boxes of records that afternoon. Clara stood and watched as the men carried them out to the vehicle, signed the transfer record, kept 1 copy for herself, then sat down at the long table, which was now completely bare. At 6:30 that evening, there was a knock at the back door. Margaret Hobbs was standing there with a cardboard box held against her stomach. She had taken a bus from Marblehead into Boston, then another one across to Charlestown, and she had gotten lost for part of the way because she didn't own a smartphone. How long she had been standing outside the door, she didn't say. I asked Mrs. Nolan in the shop, she said. She told me to come around the back. I'm sorry I came without letting you know. Clara opened the door wider and took the box from her. It was lighter than it looked. Sit down. Would you like some water? I'll only stay for a little while. I have to be back for my shift at 9. Mrs. Hobbs sat down, rested both hands in her lap, and looked at the box on the table. 4 years ago, after Mrs. Serena, Mr. Rinaldi's late wife's funeral, Mrs. Crane told us to clear everything out of her room, put it all in bags and have it taken away. Mrs. Crane, said Mr. Rinaldi couldn't bear to look at any of it, and that was probably true. She placed one hand on the edge of the box but didn't open it. I was the one cleaning the room. I kept one box. Why? Because she gave me a coat 3 days before she died. Clara sat down in the chair across from her. She gave it to me close to 10 o'clock at night, on the 3rd floor landing, where no one passes at that hour. She was weak, but her grip was firm. She told me to hide it somewhere safe, not to hang it in the closet, and not to give it to anyone. I asked how long I was supposed to keep it. She said, until someone in this house is brave enough to ask for the truth. Mrs. Hobbs opened the box. I didn't understand what she meant. I still haven't understood it for 4 years, but I kept it. Inside were several books, a small wooden box, and a dark wool coat folded into quarters. She placed the coat on the table. Why did you bring this to me? Clara asked. Because last week you stood in that sitting room and said my name out loud. Mrs. Hobbs said nothing more about it. She didn't mention the night in the 2nd floor hallway either, and Clara didn't ask. She pushed the coat across the table. You're the one who knows how to look at papers. I only know how to look at clothes. Look at the hem. Clara turned the coat over and spread the hem beneath the light. The edge had been machine-stitched, in a perfectly even line, just like any expensive wool coat. but along a section about one handspan to the left, the lining had been cut open and sewn shut again by hand with blue thread, the stitches large and uneven, some of them crossing over one another. She sewed that herself, Mrs. Hobbs said, not a seamstress. No, I've been mending clothes for 2 years. I know the stitches of someone who knows how to use a needle. These were made by someone who had never held one before. Clara took a small pair of scissors from the drawer, cut the stitches one by one, and placed the pieces of thread carefully to one side. Inside the lining was a small piece of paper folded into quarters. She opened it beneath the light. The handwriting slanted sharply, written fast in ballpoint ink. Vivian keeps 2 sets of books. Tom Delaney found them. If anything happens to me, look in the place where no man in this house has ever set foot. Clara read it a second time, then a third. She didn't cry out. She didn't stand. She laid the piece of paper on the table and held 2 fingers against its edges to keep it from curling back up. Have you read this before? No. I didn't know there was anything inside. I only noticed the strange stitching. What day did she give you the coat? September 16th. I remember because it was my grandchild's birthday. 3 days before September 19th. Clara placed the note beside the coat and sat silently for a while. She thought about the 6-week gap on the hand-drawn chart she had made. She thought about those 4 words, if anything happens to me, written in ballpoint pen, written quickly. And she thought about a woman who lived in a house with 40 people serving her, yet still had to take a needle into her own hands and sew something into the hem of her own coat, because among those 40 people, there wasn't a single person she dared ask for help. Mrs. Hobbs, I want to ask you one question, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Go ahead. In that house, is there anywhere men don't go? I'm not asking about a place where they're forbidden. I'm asking whether there is a place that, over all these years, no man has ever had any reason to enter. Mrs. Hobbs looked down at her hands. She thought for quite a while. Yes, she said, there is one place. Clara waited, but let me explain it properly first. Don't rush me. She looked up. Do you have any more questions for me? A lot. Then I'll stay another 15 minutes. She pulled her chair closer to the table. She gave me this coat 3 days before she died, and told me not to give it to anyone until someone in the house was willing to ask me a question. 4 years. You're the first person who ever asked my name. Clara didn't need Mrs. Hobbs to answer. She had cleaned that house for 11 months, and she had known the place since her first week there. The cleaning supply room at the end of the 3rd floor hallway, behind an unpainted wooden door, where they kept rags, chemicals, toilet paper, vacuum bags, and a few broken buckets. There was no camera inside. No one kept inventory. In 11 months, the only people Clara had ever seen enter that room were herself and the 2 women on the afternoon cleaning shift. That's the place, Mrs. Hobbs said when Clara named it. Did Mrs. Serena go up to the 3rd floor? She did, 3 or 4 times a week during the last few months. People said she was walking to keep her legs strong. At 9 o'clock the following evening, Mrs. Hobbs opened the service door at the east end of the house and let Clara inside. That door led directly to the back staircase, the staircase that only the staff had used for 40 years. And both women went up wearing the house's gray uniforms. No one asked them a single question. They passed a security guard on the 2nd floor landing. He glanced at them, then lowered his eyes back to his phone. The invisibility that had caused these 2 women to be treated like furniture for so many years carried them through 3 floors that night, without leaving so much as a trace in anyone's mind. There was a camera mounted in the corner of the 3rd floor hallway ceiling near the window, and its indicator light was still glowing. Clara saw it, and she walked directly beneath it because she was wearing a uniform, and because every evening in that house, people in uniforms passed beneath that camera. Inside the supply room, she started with the things no one ever touched. Rags and chemicals were taken out every month. Vacuum bags came in boxes of 24, and one box was always used up before another was opened. On the highest shelf were 3 boxes of vacuum bags. 2 had already been opened. The 3rd was still sealed with tape, and the tape had yellowed with age. Clara took it down, cut through the tape, and beneath the upright rows of paper bags was a large cardboard envelope. There were 3 things inside. The first was a black-covered ledger, ruled by hand into 2 columns. The left column showed the amount reported on payroll. The right column showed the amount actually paid. 9 years, every month accounted for, not 1 month missing. Clara turned to the month she had started working there and found Mrs. Hobbs's line. The left column said $23 an hour. The right said 19. You make $19 an hour, Clara said. Yes. In the records sent to Mr. Rinaldi, you make 23. Mrs. Hobbs said nothing. The second thing inside the envelope was a small flash drive. Clara plugged it into her old laptop right there in the room sat down on the storage floor, and opened the folders one by one. Scanned invoices, organized by year, transfer orders, organized by month, and one spreadsheet named Outflow, showing that every payment made to the 3 shell contractors ultimately flowed to a single name, a logistics consulting company registered in New Bedford, founded in 2017, with no website and no employees. Clara knew what that city name meant. Everyone who lived in the region knew New Bedford was Amato territory, and the Amatos and the Rinaldis hadn't sat at the same table since before Vittorio took control. She didn't say a word. She photographed the screen showing each folder, then removed the flash drive. The third thing in the envelope was a stapled packet of papers. The first page carried the accounting department's printed heading and the signature of Thomas Delaney, dated August 11th, 3 years earlier. It was the final report he had written. Clara read all 4 pages, and she read slowly, because these were her father's words. He listed 9 duplicate expenses, 2 accounts with nearly identical names, and 1 transfer from the pension fund that he stated explicitly had no legal basis. On the final page, he wrote 1 line, recommending that an independent outside audit be brought in. Behind that page was another sheet of paper. No heading, no signature, only 3 handwritten lines, written at 3 different times because the ink was a different color each time. Delaney asking about duplicate account. Delaney refuses to alter pension fund figures. Delaney must be dealt with before September audit. Clara remained seated on the storage room floor for a long time. Mrs. Hobbs stood at the doorway with her back to the hall, keeping watch, and she didn't turn around to look at Clara even once. "Did you find it?" she asked. "I found it. Can you stand up?" "Yes." Clara put all 3 items back into the envelope, slipped the envelope inside the lining of her coat, then repacked the box of vacuum bags exactly as she had found it, and returned it to the highest shelf. She turned off the light, closed the door, and the 2 women went back down the same service staircase they had used before. On the 2nd floor landing, the security guard was still sitting in the same place, and he still didn't look up. When they reached the service door, Mrs. Hobbs asked, "Where are you going now?" "Back to Charlestown. Tomorrow morning I'm taking this to him." "Are you afraid?" "Yes." Clara pulled her coat zipper up, but my father wrote 4 pages before they dealt with him. "I have 3 things, and I have you." By the time Clara returned to Charlestown, it was nearly midnight. She opened the envelope again and turned to the final page of the stapled packet, the page she hadn't had time to read while she was inside the storage room. It wasn't a report. It was a typed record of a meeting, dated September 13th, 4 years earlier, with 2 initials at the top of the page. The record was short and dry, without a single adjective. The person taking the notes had presented Mr. Delaney with 2 options. Option 1, he would sign a statement accepting full responsibility for the $2,400,000, leave his job that same day, file no appeal, and speak to no one. In return, the family wouldn't prosecute him, wouldn't take the matter outside, and wouldn't touch anyone close to him. On that line, it stated explicitly that his daughter would be left alone. Option 2, he wouldn't sign. In that case, the textile company and the construction company would be reported as suffering severe losses caused by prolonged accounting misconduct, and all 40 employees of the 2 companies would be dismissed within the month. The record ended with 1 line. Mr. Delaney asked for 2 days to think. He was given 1. He signed on September 14th. 3 weeks after that date, he died in his rented apartment in Quincy. Clara read the page 3 times. Then she folded it back into the envelope, turned off the light, and sat in the darkness of the storage room for a long time. She didn't cry out loud. The next morning, when Mrs. Nolan opened the shop at 7 o'clock, she found Clara still sitting at the long table with the envelope in front of her, and she asked if she was all right. "For 3 years, I believed he was innocent because I was his daughter," Clara said. "Now I have the papers. It turns out believing was much easier." At 9 o'clock that morning, she arrived in Marblehead. Vittorio received her in the study, closed the door, and Dante Russo stood outside in the hallway. Clara placed the black ledger, the flash drive, and the stapled packet on the desk, then stepped back and said nothing more. He started with the ledger. He turned from the first page, reading the 2 columns, and he read very slowly. About a third of the way through, he stopped, flipped back several pages, then continued. He didn't ask her a single question. He plugged the flash drive into the computer, opened the spreadsheet titled Outflow, and stared at the name of the company in New Bedford longer than he looked at anything else. Then he moved to the stapled packet, the 4-page report written by Thomas Delaney, the page with the 3 handwritten lines, and the meeting record. He read that page twice. Afterward, he opened the ledger again and turned to the appendix at the back, where copies of signed authorizations had been clipped together. He stopped at the fourth one. For about half a minute, he said nothing. "I signed this," he said. Clara stepped closer to look. It was a restructuring order dated October, 4 years earlier. Shut down the textile company and the construction company. Dismiss 40 employees. The justification was the loss report attached behind it, and Clara had read that loss report 3 times over the past 2 weeks. It had been prepared by the Household Management Office. "You signed what she put in front of you," Clara said. "That doesn't make the signature any less mine." He turned to the next page. This was an internal judgment dated September 15th, 4 years earlier, declaring Thomas Delaney guilty and terminating every relationship between him and the family. At the bottom was Vittorio's signature, written in black ink, clean and without hesitation. "This one too," he said. 2 pages, 3 weeks apart. One took your father's name. The other took 40 people's jobs. Clara didn't answer. Vittorio read both pages again, then placed his hand on the cover of the ledger and closed it. He rose from his chair. He didn't shout. He didn't strike the desk. He didn't grab anything from the tabletop. Didn't throw anything. Didn't shove the chair aside. He simply stood there with both hands at his sides, staring at the wall behind Clara. And for those 30 seconds, neither of them made a sound. Clara had spent 11 months in that house hearing people talk about this man's anger, and she understood then that everything she had heard was wrong. His anger made no sound at all. Vittorio walked to the door and opened it. Dante Russo straightened in the hallway. Vittorio said 3 words. "Get my mother." Dante looked into the room, looked at the black ledger on the desk, then looked back at his employer. "Sir, what about Mrs. Crane? Do I need to?" "No one tells Mrs. Crane anything. No one speaks to Mrs. Crane. Let her work as usual today." He closed the door again. Clara said, "You know what the name New Bedford means now." "I know." "Then this isn't about money anymore." "It was never only about money." Vittorio returned to the desk and stood looking at the black ledger without touching it. "You gave me this morning. You understand that from this moment on, I can't choose the slow way anymore." "I know," Clara said. "I also know that last week you could have chosen it, and you didn't." He didn't argue with that. He didn't apologize. He only said, "Stay here until my mother comes down. Don't go anywhere alone in this house." Vivian Crane didn't need anyone to tell her. At 9:15 that morning, she was sitting in her office replaying the 3rd-floor hallway footage from the night before, as she did once every week. In the recording, 2 people in gray uniforms walked toward the far end of the hallway at 9 o'clock, and the one in front wasn't a member of the afternoon shift. At 10:20, the fire alarm in the office wing sounded. Flames broke out in the paper records room and spread into the adjoining server room, the 2 rooms sitting side by side in the low building connected to the west wing. Vittorio reached the courtyard less than 30 seconds after the alarm sounded. Rosalind was already there with her coat draped over one arm. He handed his mother the cardboard envelope containing the black ledger and the flash drive. "Take this outside the gate, all the way out to the street, and stand somewhere under a light. And then don't give it to anyone. Not to family, not to my men, not to the police. Give it only to the family's attorney, and only when he is standing in front of you." She took the envelope and left. Clara came running from the service entrance. "Who's still inside?" she asked the security guard pulling out a hose. 2 people from the records office. The main door is blocked by smoke. The side door from the records room opens onto the back courtyard. It's locked from the inside. She turned, looked across the courtyard, and saw Walter Pruitt coming toward them on his crutch, as quickly as he could manage. "Mr. Pruitt, you have a toolkit in your vehicle. The side door in the back courtyard." "I know that door," he said. "Wooden frame, hinges on the outside." He changed direction, and 2 security guards followed him. "Mrs. Hobbs stood at the edge of the lawn, holding a shift schedule in one hand. Clara called to her. "Mrs. Hobbs, the night shift and morning shift are mixed together. Get everyone onto the lawn and call every name." "Do I call from the schedule or by face?" "From the schedule. Then check every face against it. If someone is missing, call their name out loud." Mrs. Hobbs called out each name from the daily shift roster, her voice steady as every staff member answered one by one. Within 4 minutes, all 40 present employees were accounted for on the lawn, standing in calm order. In the back courtyard, the side door burst open, and the 2 missing records employees came out coughing, but on their own feet. Clara confirmed the total. 42 people, everyone safe. She turned back, and Vittorio was no longer where he had been standing. "He went inside," one of the security guards said. "How long ago?" "Less than a minute." Clara grabbed a blanket from the pile of things people had just dragged out of the storage building dumped a bucket of water over it, and moved close to the back courtyard door. She didn't go inside. She stood 2 steps outside the threshold, where there was still enough air to breathe, and she stayed there for exactly 90 seconds. Then he came out. Vittorio emerged from the smoke, carrying a metal records box against his chest, and one sleeve of his shirt was on fire. Clara threw the wet blanket over that arm and pressed down once, hard and clean. The flames went out. He set the box on the courtyard and dropped into a crouch beside it, breathing. The fire trucks reached the gate. "You could have died in there," Clara said. Vittorio placed one hand on the lid of the metal box. "So could the 40 names inside this." She looked at the box. "What's in it?" "The paper personnel records for both companies, and the original pension contribution ledgers, with every employee's signature for every contribution period." He spoke in short sentences, because he was still catching his breath. "The electronic copies are in the server room. The server room is burning. If both are lost, those 40 people can't prove they ever worked there, can't prove how much they paid in, and someone could say the fund never existed at all." Firefighters dragged a hose past them. Clara stood, reached down for the box, and he let her take it. "I'll carry this out to your mother," she said. "You go to the ambulance." "I'm fine." "You go to the ambulance, then you come back and tell that to your own people. You don't tell it to me." Vittorio stood. He looked toward the burning low building, where the roofs over the 2 rooms had already collapsed, then toward the lawn, where 40 people still stood in orderly lines, and Mrs. Hobbs was still holding the shift schedule. "Who told her to take attendance?" he asked. "I did." "Who told Mr. Pruitt to break open the side door?" "I did." He nodded once. Then he called Dante Russo over and said, loudly enough for the 3 people nearest them to hear, "From this moment on, no one leaves this property unless their name is entered in the log. Family included. My people included." Dante looked toward the west wing. "Sir, Mrs. Crane is scheduled to leave at 11 o'clock this morning." Vittorio looked at the watch on his wrist. "Then she has 25 minutes left." They brought Vivian Crane into the large sitting room at noon, the very room where the 5 women had once sat and read out names. Rosalind sat at the head of the table. Vittorio stood beside the window. Dante Russo stood at the door. Clara placed 4 sets of papers on the tabletop, spaced evenly apart, then opened the first. "I'm going to tell you 4 things. You can interrupt me at any time." Vivian didn't sit in the chair someone had pulled out for her. "First is the money. 3 contractors that don't exist. 7 people receiving salaries who don't exist. 2 pension funds drained nearly empty. 9 years, $14,200,000. Vivian said. "I've never seen that ledger before." "Second," Clara said, opening the second file. "All of that money flows into a logistics consulting company in New Bedford. There are 2 more folders on the flash drive that I didn't mention yesterday. One contains Mr. Rinaldi's weekly travel schedule for 4 straight years. The other contains internal financial reports, sent every Sunday night to a mailbox registered in New Bedford." Dante Russo took 1 step into the room. "You were selling information to the Amato family," Clara said. "For 4 years. Vivian didn't answer that. Clara opened the 3rd file and pushed it toward Rosalind. "I'd like you to read this one, Mrs. Rinaldi. If I read it, it becomes personal." Rosalind picked up the page and read the entire thing aloud, slowly. 2 options. Sign, and his daughter would be left alone. Refuse, and 40 people would lose their jobs within the month. Asked for 2 days. Given 1. When she finished, she placed the page back on the table and said nothing more. "Fourth," Clara said. She opened the final file. 6 weeks before she died, Mrs. Serena Rinaldi sent you an email asking that an independent outside auditor be brought in to review all of the accounts. That email is no longer on the server in this house, but she printed a copy. Clara placed the page on the table. For the 6 weeks that followed, every irregular payment in the books stopped completely. Then she died. Then 1 week after the funeral, they started again. No one spoke. Vivian stood straight, both hands folded in front of her, as they were every day. 14 years, she said. "I've been in this house for 14 years. I know how he takes his coffee. I know which nights he doesn't sleep. I know the anniversary of his father's death. I know which years he needs to be reminded, and which years he shouldn't be reminded." She was here for 11 months. "Yes," Clara said. "And in those 14 years, you were the only person who could reach him. You decided which papers reached his desk, who was allowed into his office, who was allowed to tell him what." She looked directly at Vivian without raising her voice. "You didn't love him. You loved that position. So when Mrs. Rinaldi began talking about finding a wife for her son, you didn't stop her. You created a game so you could choose the woman yourself, or make certain no one was chosen at all. You told a 66-year-old mother with a weak heart, frightened that she might not live long enough to see her son married, that the way to find a good wife was to make 5 young women choose which servant should be thrown away. You took a mother's fear of dying and turned it into a tool. Vivian said nothing. And you were right about one thing, Clara said. There is someone this house can live without. Vivian remained standing for about 3 more seconds. Then her knees gave way, and she dropped onto the carpet in the middle of the room, bracing herself with both hands, and she began to cry. No one moved toward her. No one touched her. I didn't mean for her to die, Vivian said, speaking into the carpet rather than to anyone in the room. I only wanted her to stop that audit. I only gave them her travel schedule. That was all I gave them. Rosalind Rinaldi rose from her chair. She didn't slap Vivian. She didn't shout. She walked to within 2 steps of where Vivian was kneeling and stopped there. I brought you into this house when you were 22 years old, she said. I called you my daughter. For 49 years, I hid the fact that I once cleaned hotel rooms, and you were the only person in this house I had ever intended to tell. Then you let me sit at that table, holding that silver tray, telling 5 young women to decide whether there was anyone in my house we could throw away. Her hand rose to her chest. You turned me into the very thing I was most afraid of becoming when I was young. She staggered half a step. Vittorio moved away from the window, caught his mother with one arm, and helped her back into the chair. Vivian looked up. Before any of you call anyone, she said, her voice clear again, there is a file in my private attorney's office. If I don't make a phone call before 6 o'clock every evening, it goes directly to the federal authorities. It doesn't contain only me. It contains 40 years of this family. Dante Russo spoke to Vittorio without looking at Vivian. Sir, from here, let me handle it the family way. It'll be finished today, and no one will ever hear another word. Vittorio rose from beside his mother. He hadn't said a single word throughout the entire confrontation. Call the family attorney, he said. Tell him to contact Assistant United States Attorney Helen Marsh this afternoon. Request a proffer agreement, and turn over the black ledger and the flash drive. Everything. Don't hold back a single page. 3 weeks later, the large sitting room had been rearranged into 12 rows of chairs. The 40 members of the household staff sat in the front. Behind them were the 40 people who had once worked for the textile and construction companies, together with their families. Vittorio Rinaldi didn't sit in the chair at the head of the table. He stood in the middle of the room, level with the first row. My ignorance didn't take your wages from you, he said, but my power allowed it to happen, and my name protected the person who did it for 9 years. I'm not standing here to explain myself. I'm standing here to tell you how I'm going to give back what was taken. He announced 3 things. First, Walter Pruitt had been fully cleared of every accusation, and the official finding had already been read aloud to the entire household staff that morning. Second, Thomas Delaney was declared innocent in every family record, and 321 letters of correction would be sent to every person who had received the old notice 4 years earlier. Third, the Marblehead estate would be sold, along with his father's entire art collection, to repay every dollar of wages that had been falsely recorded over 9 years, restore both pension funds in full, and compensate the 40 families whose jobs had been taken away. One member of the council stood. Sir, your ancestral land, your father's paintings, why should they pay the price for someone else's crime? Vittorio looked toward the back of the room, where members of the staff were standing along the wall because there were no chairs left. Because it happened under my roof, through my authority, under my name. I won't make the people who were robbed pay for what I failed to see. No one else stood. The next day, he placed a contract in front of Clara. The position was director of all household operations and personnel, with a salary 4 times what Mrs. Crane had been paid. I decline, Clara said. Why? Because you're appointing me. And you'll be able to remove me the day one of my decisions becomes inconvenient to you. The problem with that chair wasn't only the person sitting in it. The problem was that it gave one person too many things at once. She turned the contract over, picked up a pen, and wrote 7 lines on the back. No one person may control payroll, hiring, and disciplinary authority at the same time. The books must be reviewed twice a year by an independent outside auditor. Every employee must receive an individual paper wage statement and sign to acknowledge it. No one may be dismissed without a written reason and the right to respond. Employees must elect 2 representatives to attend every meeting concerning wages and work schedules. Pension funds must remain completely separate from operating budgets, with separate accounts and separate authorized signers. Anyone reporting misconduct must never be required to seek permission from the person they are reporting. Vittorio read every line. He didn't bargain over a single word, and he signed beneath all 7. 3 months later, Clara opened a household staffing company in Boston. She hired widows, people over 55, people who had been injured, and people who carried one line on their record that they couldn't erase. Margaret Hobbs became employee number 1 and served as training manager, and she never cleaned another floor. Walter Pruitt took charge of transportation. Every worker's wages went directly into an account in that worker's own name. 6 months later, Vittorio came to her office, stood in line and waited his turn like every other client, then placed a packet of papers on her desk. It wasn't a ring. It was a legal agreement, guaranteeing that her company would remain completely independent from every entity bearing the Rinaldi name, could never be purchased by them, could never have its shares acquired by them, and could never be forced to surrender ownership of its contracts or client lists, even if she married him. "I want this settled before I ask you anything personal," he said. Clara read all the way through the final page. "What are you asking? For the right to keep knowing you, not as the person who saved my family, not as the person I threw out of my house, and not as someone who owes me affection, because I finally did the right thing." She folded the papers closed. "If I argue with you in front of 40 employees, will you still call me your wife? I'm more afraid of the day you think you're not allowed to argue with me." Clara put the packet into her desk drawer. "Dinner tomorrow night. Bring the March payroll. Page 4 still has one number wrong." He smiled for the first time. Of course it does. This story leaves us with 3 things. First, a person's dignity doesn't disappear because they do humble work. It disappears when the people around them stop seeing them. Second, kindness doesn't begin with grand gifts. It begins with asking someone's name and remembering it. Third, real power isn't measured by how many decisions a person can make, but by whether they have the courage to stand up and take responsibility for the decisions they got wrong. If today's story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share it so we can continue listening together to more meaningful stories every day. How did this story make you feel? And in your own life, have you ever met someone who quietly helped you before you had the chance to ask their name or say thank you? Please leave a few words in the comments. We truly hope to hear the feelings that come from deep within your heart. To everyone watching this video, we wish you good health, a joyful life, and peace in every day ahead. Goodbye for now, and we look forward to seeing you again in the next video.